are you?
Uh, do we
How's your
have
spring
a
break?
meeting? Do you and I have a meeting?
I was gonna circle back next week because I figured you were
So,
enjoying
because,
spring break, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure. But I
yeah,
figured I wouldn't bother you during spring break.
you're attending to STWG meeting?
Yeah, I'm a fellow now. So that's
She's
pretty
our
cool.
science to policy fellow, Adele.
Okay, I didn't know that. Hey,
Yeah,
congratulations.
thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just didn't know if I got into a wrong Zoom. These days,
No,
Zoom, Zoom, click on this, click on that. So great. Well, good to have you.
thank you.
Hi, Dave.
Hello. I just wanted to be sure, just in case I can share. Okay, just in case we need it.
Okay, perfect.
Hi, Fernando.
Hi there, how are you?
Okay, how you doing?
Good.
Now I can't seem to get out of share. What happened here? There it is. All right, Rahat. So I've made you the co-host. So I don't know what that means if you hit record, if you get the recording, or if I get the recording.
Is cloud recording enabled? Do you know? I
It
mean, if it
We will
isn't,
enable it, but we do
yeah,
have the ability to record.
yeah. I think you are
Okay.
set as recording. I'm looking at the participants list and you have like a red flashing dot next to your name.
Yeah. Okay. I won't start it yet, but I will soon.
Right.
Oh, I think it's already
Yeah,
started.
yeah, and already
Oh,
I
maybe
already
Melissa did it. Yeah, Melissa jumped in and did it. Okay. Thanks, Melissa.
yeah, and I just dumped the agenda on the chat, so
No problem. Thanks, Dave.
Yep. And Melissa, I think I have full rights because I can make someone a co-host. So I don't think you need to stay on.
Okay, good. Thank you. Have a
Yeah.
good weekend.
All
thank
right.
you.
Bye.
So I see that cup, Dave, with Papa on it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I have a T-shirt that says, "My favorite people call me Papa."
That's right. Oh
So
yeah, good. Well, um, we should
yeah,
compare notes and maybe exchange
absolutely.
T-shirts every once in a while and
Oh
confuse
yeah.
our grandchildren.
So I sometimes I wear and go to gym, and some of the people that I know in gym say, "Oh, Papa." So and they say, "Hey," and they say, "Yeah, I'm your favorite person." Yeah. So anyway,
That's right. That's great.
uh,
That's good.
Yeah, I think people are trickling in, so let's give
Yeah,
them
another minute maybe. Yeah.
yes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for
Huh?
joining.
Whoops.
What's happening in the world? Is there anything relevant going on out there that
yeah, that's what I would say.
is there anything going on that would affect anything?
So it's another boring day in the DMV.
Eh.
We could change this to the Science and Technical Working Group of Changing Environmental Conditions.
Like
Mm.
that.
I do relay that my wife is spending this week in Florida, in Miami specifically, and what she tells me is that down in Miami is like you're like in a different country. No one's concerned at all about these developments in Washington. Everybody's smiling, and she's not even in the touristy spring break part of Miami. It's in so I think sometimes there's a little bit of a perception issue that I mean I'd like to understand that better. I don't know that I have a full grasp, but
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
it's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Fernando, the town hall with the senator from Wyoming wasn't really. It was very loud. It was very pointed questions and stuff. I listened to some of it. So even though some rural states, they're sort of speaking up about some
Yeah.
of them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
So,
think it's outside of like this area, I think farmers and vets are like the big group that are also keyed into what's going on.
I see.
Yeah,
Well, before we get too political here, because we are
Yeah,
recording,
yeah. So it was
Yeah.
just kind of
just to remind everyone.
elevator type chit chattering. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
I think
Yeah,
it's 103, Fernando, if you want to.
Yeah. No, let's get started. Thanks a lot for joining. Looking forward to this discussion. I know that at least we have one introduction to make for Rahat. So maybe Dave, can you do that? And
Sure. Yeah, I'll start off, and then Rahat could kind of give her own elevator speech. But we're really pleased. Rahat is now the fourth or fifth Science to Policy Fellow that UMSES has had. This is through a program of Maryland Sea Grant, and where they offer fellows in various science to policy areas. Currently, MDE and DNR each have a science to policy fellow working at a high level within their agencies, and Rahat is working out of the president's office at UMSES. And currently, she's a PhD student at College Park, and Adele's on her committee. That's how we knew she was a good student, Adele.
Hey.
Yeah, that's how we knew she was
Gray,
qualified.
gray here, huh?
Or
Yeah,
at least she's patient.
right.
Well, we gotta let the Rahat judge it, Dave. So
Yeah. So she comes to us by she got her master's at University of Rhode Island, and she's finishing up her PhD. And so right now, while she's finishing her PhD, she's going to be part-time with UMSES, but we could expect a lot of the communications coming from her on behalf of the STWG, and we'll be working closely with her. So Rahat, anything else you'd like to say or that I missed? I don't.
No,
You might want to
I'm
just spend a minute talking about what your PhD is on. I think that'd be a great interest of many of the people on this.
so I have a background in watersheds and stormwater. So I've been in College Park for a while, so that background has been a long time back. But I study stormwater, green infrastructure. I'm looking at co-benefits. So co-benefits meaning if the primary benefit of green infrastructure is water quality and water quantity, I'm looking at those other benefits that structures provide, and I'm interviewing designers, and I'm doing a field study and a spatial study, and I'm looking at what are the impacts of designer background and firm type impacts those co-benefits. And I'm hoping to finish in August, crossing my fingers. And I'm excited to start here, and I've kind of been in the stormwater world for a while, so it'll be nice to expand my perspective to other things besides what I've been delving into in my dissertation. So I'm very excited to be here.
That's
you.
excellent. So the green infrastructure is good for the local weather as well as stormwater.
right.
Yeah.
Ameliorate the urban heat island effect.
Yeah. Go
That's
benefit.
one of the co-benefits I'm looking at.
That's a big one.
she's gearing up for some using some exciting modeling work as well. So assess those. Yeah.
Excellent.
Fantastic. So Dave, let's move into the next item, the agenda. I think Russ was going to share this new methane recommendation, and I saw some emails circulating just within the last hour and some wording questions. So maybe we can have a short conversation around that.
Yeah, and I'll tee it up a little bit just to remind everyone that at the end of last year, it didn't quite make it into the final set of recommendations to the Maryland Department of to the MCCC's commission report. At the last meeting, we worked on this recommendation a little bit. Russ was offering language. I took what I had heard or thought was the best language. Russ modified it, and then he modified it again. which is great. And I know there are still some questions. So with that, Russ, take it away.
All right, can you see my shared screen?
We can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement on the concept. The snag was last time we talked about anaerobic digesters, and the climate change commissioner representing agriculture said, "Whoa, wait a minute, these aren't ready for prime time yet." So that was based on a recommendation uh, from Stephanie Lansing, who's in the ag school. And she knows him pretty well. And I think they went back and forth, and she gave me some recommendations that I have modified. So there's one recommendation now in front of you. Is it big enough to see?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There was a little bit of an argument over, isn't manure just agricultural waste? And my point there was, I was on an academy commission on atmospheric emissions from animal feeding operations, and it was pointed out that referring to manure as waste is a bad idea because it's a valuable resource. So I tried to separate those two. You don't want to treat manure as waste any more than necessary because it's valuable fertilizer and should be used. So that's the only difference there. I mean, I understand in common usage, what comes out of the south end of a northbound cow is thought of as waste, but if you're trying to grow vegetables, it's a good thing. So take a look at these and see if you all agree that this is reasonably well wordsmithed.
Russ, I think it's well wordsmithed. It wasn't an argument, it was a suggestion.
It was a very polite question, is what it was, actually, Eric.
You know, one thing that I'm looking at that first sentence, again, English is my third language, but did you mean to say reduce nitrogen from agriculture, wastewater, and stormwater, oxide nitrogen from combustion? In other words, why reduced? Because you're saying to decrease methane production and emissions, active sentence would be reduce, right?
Oh, sorry, that's a chemistry word. I can improve that
you're saying reduced nitrogen.
Like ammonia and amine.
Okay, then my mistake. Okay.
No, but I think it's a good point because that will confuse commissioners.
You have an excellent point.
Well, then put the chemical, yeah.
Oops. Thank you. I tend to forget. I'm going to say urea. Everybody knows what that is.
Yep, and ammonia.
There.
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Sorry about my.
No. You picked up a good point.
That's right. Yeah.
And by the way, Ross, I agree with keeping really manure as a separate item. Being an agriculture guy, it's waste. There are different types of waste, of course, and yeah, it can be in a way. I mean, in fact, farmers use animal manure as organic fertilizer. And we had a watershed in Monocacy watershed in Double Pipe Creek area that the farmer, after putting Keystone, basically slurry storage, which was the animal manure, he actually started selling his manure to his farmer, and he got 80% cost sharing to put 520,000 gallons of slurry storage as a BMP to basically store and apply at this specific time of the year, rather than just getting rid of it and going down into the stream and all that. So, yeah, so I like keeping it separate as well.
Yeah. That's the way it's supposed to work. It's great. That's one of the problems is that the number of birds on the Delmarva Peninsula is stultifying. Right. It's approaching a billion. There are 900 million chickens, ducks, turkeys, etc. And their manure is in general not used as fertilizer. The crops are fertilized with Haber-Bosch fertilizer is shipped in from somewhere else and the feed is shipped in from somewhere else. So there's room for improvement there. It's all economics, so it's more Adele's field. But it seems an unfortunate waste of a useful resource. And now I will shut up.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big discussion. I don't want to also extend, but the idea of this poultry houses and poultry waste, because of the high buildup in soil phosphorus in coastal plain, that became a political issue. So zero discharge, in other words. So it's a little bit, yeah. So there's a big sort of stuff around it. I don't want to go into it, but yeah, but in Western Central Maryland, the dairy manure and stuff, they're really using it effectively.
Yeah.
If you go to like Walker's Mill area, north of Frederick and all that. Yeah.
Great. Fernando, I think on this one, we should actually just, for the record, have a formal vote on this recommendation moving forward. And then maybe after that, I can explain how recommendations, or Jared's on here can explain recommendations in general for this year and what the MCCC is expecting. Oh, you're on mute, Fernando.
Dave, may I interject?
Oh, sure, Alicia, sure.
Sorry. So for some reason, Zoom doesn't want to let my video work this afternoon, so forgive me. So this is Alicia Mulkey. I'm at the Maryland Department of Agriculture, and I was asked to kind of make time to join today specifically on some of the methane discussion. It came back both to me with Stephanie Lansing, but also Farm Bureau, right? Because we have a seat on the Climate Change Commission as well. So couple of points on C, but to the comment, Russ, I would not characterize poultry litter leaving the shore to the extent that you're saying. We certainly have phosphorus limited soils that, according to their nutrient management plan, cannot apply phosphorus litter, but there's a significant amount of litter being land applied on the eastern shore. It's just being moved by manure transport to the mid and upper shore, and then also going for some alternative uses for some of the mushroom composting growth. So careful how we characterize where that land application is occurring is a point or a comment. To the methane here, what was brought to my attention, and maybe for value for this committee, particularly Farm Bureau's concern with the initial wording as it was portrayed to me, was about the wording that may be mandating or suggesting some of these technology adoptions, right, without really understanding the business case for some of the, whether anaerobic digestion or others. But something that I don't think this committee was aware is the state already has a mechanism through our Animal Waste Technology Fund where we are actively funding these projects on farm, working with partners at the Maryland Energy Administration on some research, and then also undertaking a work group that was created legislatively last year at MDA to facilitate the adoption of more anaerobic digestion in farm scenarios and really bringing both guidance and clarity, excuse me, to the ag community about the permitting, utilities, all of the impacts, right, of adopting AD systems on farm and how that would work, particularly in a co-digestion system. So not just the manure feedstock, but also importing other organic materials, whether food waste or otherwise. So all of that is already underway. And so folks suggested to me that maybe this committee needed to be more aware of some of the efforts already happening, such that any recommendations you want to bring forward to the commission leverage or build on some existing activities.
Alicia, yeah, thank you. I would, you hate to just kind of say this, but simply would it be develop more mechanisms to incentivize manure or higher levels?
Develop and enhance, or develop and expand.
Yeah. Or are you not fully subscribed?
Leverage existing mechanisms.
Yeah.
How about just further develop mechanisms? Simple.
Right.
That works too.
Yeah, I think if I were, I'll let you wordsmith. It's your committee, but what I would suggest of what we're learning is two parts. First, funding, right? What the state is able to bring to bear is often not enough for the what are big capital investments, particularly in a farm scenario, right? So the funding is always something that if the state is going to, in a lean budget year, right, as we're facing, I'm having to prioritize across any number of systems. Funding support for these kind of projects, what would have to occur, whether state or federal or other forms of grants, right? So that's case number one from the ag community. Number two is really an educational piece, right? So when we're talking particularly anaerobic digestion, I think there's certainly better understanding, but we have instances where some forms of composting, certainly when we talk about thermochemical technologies that are treating our poultry litters, there is not a lot of good understanding at the local decision-making level about how to cite and adopt some of these technologies. So creating not just the business case for the farm, but really a knowledge base of the community and the decision makers, that being county council, zoning boards, like folks like that would be really involved with the permitting, even beyond the state. That has proven to be difficult. So if there is an education component, which again, we're already talking about in other forums, but I think that's something we're seeing more and more of, particularly as environmental justice concerns become, part of the criteria. Folks' lack of understanding of these technologies has proven to be a hard thing to work around in some cases, where there are benefits to the technologies, but people just fundamentally don't always understand them well, right? So you have to kind of build that case of knowledge ahead of time.
So when we developed that particular recommendation, it was trying to be as general as possible about addressing methane. And I appreciate that the agricultural community is working on mechanisms to do that already. But I would say that municipal and industrial are not. And so further developing municipal industrial data doesn't exist, as far as I know. The ag, yes, it does. And so that's sort of how we get into the wordsmithing. Do we want to call one out versus the other, or just make it as general as possible? And in my opinion, we're just trying to make it as general as possible. And that's why it just says develop mechanisms for all of these things.
Yeah, I don't have any expertise on the other side outside of ag. So
yeah, so ag definitely does, but the other ones do not. And so if we're really going to capture everything, unless we're going to have multiple other bullets, which makes it more complicated.
I like the idea of keeping it simple.
But
Certainly some municipal waste is composted.
Well, so getting to the point on the education is that, further develop mechanisms to incentivize manure and waste processing technologies, including an educational component at agriculture, municipal, and industrial sites.
Is it possible to say continue promoting and enhancing mechanisms?
Yeah. Promoting.
Incentivize, continue, because as Alicia says, there mechanisms are already in place that our, producers are using, stakeholders are using, but continue promoting, that answers also education. In other words, we are promoting the mechanisms to and enhance, promote and enhance, right? Anyway, I don't know. Oh, yeah.
The rhetoric people would like that, the trifecta. How's that?
Sounds good.
I like it.
We have other things to worry about, but that's good. That's good. There was an article in Nature that says papers that use this triptych sort of title get twice as many citations as papers with boring titles. So we can learn something from our friends in the humanities.
No, Dave, in terms of process, and I know Jared's here as well, so this is something that we would submit as part of the 2025 recommendations in the new format that the commission is developing. Is that correct?
Correct. I think so, Jared. If you're there.
Yeah. So if these are your intended recommendations, then what you would do is you would use the Google form that we distributed,
Right.
and submit using that form, one person from the STWG, and then I would receive that. And once we have all of those in, The due date was in that presentation. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's later in September. We would then share that back out with everybody so that everyone has the full list.
Right. And then each working group is allowed to submit maybe I don't know if the number is 3 or 4, but it's something like 3, right?
4 is the number this year.
4. Okay, so this is one of those 4. So we need to be very conscious of the scope of what we'll be able to submit for this year.
Yeah, in past years there would be pages, and that's just too much.
Right.
Yeah, I think the name of the game this year is short and sweet. So, the more concise you can be, I think the better. Understanding that, of course, there's a lot of supplementary information that's sometimes necessary.
And then, Jared, we'd be willing perhaps to serve as the guinea pigs of your new Google form.
Wonderful.
Given that we have a good draft,
yeah,
that might be timely. Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Fernando, I think for the record, though, we probably do want to formally vote on this recommendation moving forward.
Yeah, let's call a vote.
All right. I guess we need a motion. I will move that this be our recommendation. Does it need a second?
I'll second it if it does.
And all the ayes?
Aye.
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 Ayes have it.
All right.
Okay.
Any opposed? Yeah, just to make sure. I don't see any opposed. Okay, great.
Oh, before I relinquish the floor, one of the things we have to put on the agenda eventually, probably sooner rather than later, is are we going to make a recommendation about how Maryland gets its electricity?
Well, that is a great segue to the next topic, Russ.
Right.
So thank you for helping us move through the agenda.
I'll mail you this.
Yeah, please do. And if you don't have Rahat's email address, I'll forward it to her. But yeah, we'll make sure that it's there. The next agenda topic, and because of partly, it's something we've been talking about for quite some time, is the coordination between the different work groups. And then last month's conversation really, I thought, brought that to the forefront. There's also steering committee meetings of the MCCC, for which Fernando serves on, and I help as a backup. And we brought it up at the last steering committee meeting, how we really thought, once again, it was really important for good coordination between different work groups, so that our experts on the STWG either could have input on some of those recommendations, or receive questions from those other work groups that they're struggling with. And that was well received. And it turns out, there's 3 different work groups now working in the energy space. There's the mitigation work group. All of a sudden I don't have them in front of me. There is one that's directly on energy. Jared, do you have those?
Yeah, if I may. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So the 2 energy working groups are the Energy Resilience and Efficiency Working Group, and the other one is the the Energy Industry Revitalization Working Group. Whereas the prior is more focused on the infrastructure. The small industry working group is focused mostly on the impact of small businesses.
So there is the mitigation working group has invited kind of all these different groups to meet together. They have a date and a time, which is April 2nd at 9 a.m. I hope I have that right. And we will send out that date to make sure that everyone has it. But I wanted to first really try to get...
If I might interject there for a moment, Dave.
Yeah.
I think that the intention for that steering committee meeting was more just for some of the top level folks from yourself and Fernando, perhaps are hot. I don't think this was necessarily intended to be like a joint meeting with full membership.
Right. Yeah. Let's work on that a little bit, Jared, because I'm afraid that we're going to keep having meetings about meetings and not
Which
actually.
is a common commission process
Yeah.
for sure.
But-
Just
but
noting
what-
that the only representation there from the other working groups will be on the mitigation side, their steering committee, and from the energy working groups, Andrew Place. So
Okay.
yeah, they won't have outside attendees from their working
Okay.
group.
Okay.
All right. Well, fair enough. And then, but I would like to get some, if we can get some volunteers who'd be willing to kind of work with these other work groups, I think is important for us to kind of go in there with and not just leave it at the senior level, people in these meetings in the future. So, I know this is an important topic for many of you, but if there's ideally 3 or 4 that could try to make themselves available for future meetings after we figure out how we're going to get organized on this for future meetings, probably in the spring and summer. And I don't know if it'll be just 1 or 2 meetings or less than that, but it would be great. And then we could work then in scheduling those future meetings within your schedules, considering your schedules as those meetings move forward. So a kind of a call for volunteers on this topic. Don't all raise your hands at once.
I don't necessarily want to take more things on, but I'm happy to work with any of the other energy groups.
Great. And great. Thank you. We could always let you know what topics they're most concerned about too. That would help you decide whether it's, in your wheelhouse.
All
to
right.
go.
And having said that, I got to drop off because I got another meeting now, but if it ends in time, I'll come back.
Thank you.
See ya.
I'll volunteer too.
Thank you, Jonah.
Perfect.
So it's good.
Well,
I mean, I will be glad to help, but I'm not, I don't have that much, knowledge base on this, but I can get help from others and dig into it, but if needed. Otherwise, I'll give priority to those colleagues that they're working in that area. I was going to ask a question though. Are any of these groups discussing anything, because we are talking about energy and prior administration had a certain policy on energy and alternate sources of energy, green energy versus current administration? How would that change the conversation? Or maybe it is premature question. I don't know.
Yeah, I think they're working on everything, right? So, yeah.
And it's important to note that the 2 energy working groups haven't met yet this year. They're waiting till after session, so that they have to really establish their priorities for this year as of this time.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
Well, why don't we start with Eric and Jonah, and then if there's particular other areas we learn about that they want to focus on, we could open that up again and see if there are other members of this work group that could work on it. And then a second part of this topic is that, one of our priorities, kind of a longer term priority, was to start envisioning what net zero would look like. And the mitigation working group saw that and would like to work with us on that. And so as we begin those meetings, we'll be calling for some of their volunteers to work with us on trying to envision what net zero looks like for Maryland. And so that's more of a, let's see when we start working on that topic and who from their groups can help us.
Dave, I on that point, I mean, I think it would be a mistake to start from ground zero and thinking of this blue sky, because we do have a plan,
Exactly. No.
And a plan, and so
Yeah.
we should look at what can be done to help advance that plan, and what
Yes.
problems may exist with the plan.
Yeah, and when we put in that as one of our priorities, we reference the plan that they already have, and how to advance it, how to think it through more and advance it. Great.
In that regard, I mean, although it's a long-term challenge, it's not going to have to be solved next year or whatever. But that the plan leaves with a miracle then happens at the end with respect to negative emissions. So that's something I think we ought to keep on our radar to talk about how both with respect to natural systems, the limits of what they could be for negative emissions and what the other opportunities are with respect to carbon storage and things of that sort that are out there.
Yeah, you make a good point, Don. After you made some sort of crack at the last meeting, I took a look, and the last bits are substantially more than bits.
Yeah. It's like that old cartoon, and then the guy's doing the equations on the board, and he says, and then a miracle happens.
It's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, great. Fernando, on that topic, that's all I had at this point.
Okay, great. And I think, I mean, the next topic, we had started talking a little bit about it late last year and also a little bit this year, but maybe with this previous conversation that we've had today, I think it comes a little bit into focus, and the general idea of this discussion, as I had framed it, back in December of 24, was that as we look at 2025 and beyond, our working group has essentially two key tasks. One is submit our recommendations on science and technology, and the second piece is to draft the science update to the annual report. But prompted by several conversations, is there something more fun, more long-term, more attractive that we could do in parallel to all of this that could be more longer term, not something that we would accomplish just in 2025, but kind of a multi-year work plan for a group. And then we sketched out some ideas that are still very much in draft form for conversation. But what I wanted to do today is maybe spend a few minutes looking at these again in the context of things that we've been talking about, building off, looking at net zero and energy production, like how does Maryland power itself, right? And how can we stage the longer term work, study, research that will be required to address some of those issues. Building off things that have already been developed, the MDE has commissioned a couple of studies with University of Maryland Center for Global Sustainability and others so there is a base to build off. If there are things that we would like to do as a group, and not necessarily that we would, because everybody in this group has got multiple obligations, and I'm not looking to add anything. You add a new report to be written by you, but if there are things that we think should be done medium to long term, I would explore vehicles to get those things funded, staffed somehow that they can be accomplished. So this is like a little bit of a wish list, fun list for us to explore. And we had come up originally with these three ideas, and again, these are just drafts, and they're included in the agenda. Look more closely at nitrous oxide as part of the greenhouse gas inventory. Update the comprehensive assessment of climate change impacts that was done back in 2008, and then create a scenario analysis for carbon net zero Maryland for inspiration purposes. So those are the three big ideas, and we spelled them out. I don't want to go through again through the bullet list, but probably more here is to have a conversation whether are those three the ideas we should be pursuing, and anything else that you want to add. So that's a little bit of I want to spend maybe a few minutes on that. Yes, Jonah.
I really like the scenario analysis as something to do. I think that's something that we haven't done actually for a number of years, sort of step back, first do a full assessment of what energy flows are happening in the state, how they correlate to emissions, et cetera, and then play a game. And at the risk of putting more work on my own plate, I've been actually working on developing some framework to actually have that discussion. So I'm going to volunteer actually to not only help out with that, but even maybe lead a discussion in a month or two.
Great.
So,
That's fantastic. That's the sort of thing that we want to, give you something to do that you would want to do regardless of whether you had the time. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So I've been doing it on the national level and also now translating it to Maryland. So it's interesting because we tend to, it's not about making policy. It's about identifying where the bottlenecks in the implementation of Maryland's plans are in the future. Where are the things that are actually going to stop us in our tracks before we can actually get to the the goals that have been set out. So it's a good exercise.
Great.
Jonah, does that include also sort of carbon credit and carbon credit sales? In other words, I'm really thinking, we were talking about education. If we are going to get the stakeholders to use practices that do more carbon sequestration besides adaptation, and so therefore they can do mitigation contributions and all that. And so any of the forms of energy that they are using, does that include those carbon credits in the form of even its market as an educational?
So you can approach this in a couple of different ways. And one of them is the economic motivation for doing stuff that you're suggesting. I generally like to shy away from that, or I'm shying away from it with what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to just identify where the sources of, sources and sectors of energy use and emissions. If you guys remember back to my hydrogen talk last year, I even started a little bit at that kind of level. The reason I stay away from economics is because I think that if we've learned anything, the economic tides can shift very abruptly, and credits can come and go, and one shouldn't ever rely on that. I think that we should sort of identify principles of where we want to be and why we want to be there, and not necessarily think about it in terms of the how the dollars are flowing.
No, I mean I agree, and it is that principle understanding and principle knowledge base is the key. But also, again, I am in agriculture sector. Maybe Alicia can comment or whatever. But usually, when you want to promote a practice that will help to mitigate in agriculture industry, to get to net zero, you want to really incentivize it certain ways. Because they are already stranded, they are not big, huge, sort of industry and so on. That's why I'm talking about. Okay,
you're right, and I agree with you. But if you step back, for instance, and you look at the emissions from the agricultural sector compared to, for instance, emissions from transportation, emissions from the agricultural sector are frankly very small relatively. And so if I were to think about hitting our net zero goals, where do I want to focus my attentions most dramatically? Of course, agricultural sector emissions and things like that are all tied up with the health of the bay and other ecosystems in the state. So it's not something to be ignored, but it also speaks to where the science and technology prioritization focus should be.
No, no. Thanks for this discussion. And what I'll add just to maybe provide a little bit of more context to something like this that we could do is that the MDE contracted commission, the University of Maryland Center for Global Sustainability. They issued this very nice Maryland's Climate Pollution Reduction Plan back in 2023. If you look at that study plus the modeling and the analysis addendum that comes into that, they use tools that have been developed by the Joint Global Climate Change Research Institute, the GCAM model, GCAM USA. And the nice thing about that approach, from my read out is that you're using a global model, you're making computations at the state of Maryland level, So there is a consistency between, interventions that you can do in Maryland and how they fit into the overall picture, right? And of course, in doing that, what you may sacrifice a little bit is the intricacies of doing more detailed analysis within Maryland, which is, I think, what probably this group can add to that. And then the other thing I'll say with respect to this is that this is also an opportunity to engage with players, actors out, within the commission and within all the other groups on kind of developing these scenarios that are Maryland specific with increased level of detail, and do something that I know that Secretary McElwain is really keen on, which is engaging with communities and stakeholders and industries that are affected by these potential interventions. So if we're gonna go through a net zero, GCAM will give you a very nice set of results and graphs and all that stuff, but those have not been socialized with the impacted players, and so there is a gap there that this group or a study of this kind along the lines of what Jonah was describing could fill. So that's a little bit of the what we could engage with. And this also ties the second product or study or priority that we identified, which is the updating the global warming and the free state analysis. And since we have Don here, maybe Don can provide a few words of background. And
yeah,
I think this ties together with this.
Yeah, I was giving some thought about this, and we started that assessment 2007, which means 18 years ago. Since then, there have been, I think, 2 additional IPCC cycles, and 2 additional national assessment cycles. So there's a lot more information and understanding, number one. Secondly, and then another thought is that we've had, since the commission began, we have had this adaptation and response working group that this was really intended to do. How do they need to understand what kind of changes we need to anticipate to adapt to them. And I haven't attended one of their meetings in, 7 or 8 years, so I don't know what they're doing. I did see some agendas of some of their meetings, and I didn't get a sense of a lot of forward progress. So first order, we ought to understand our clients, and that there ought to be some sit down and discussion with the adaptation and response working group, better understand where they are, what information they need, and so on going forward. So that's one thought. Another thought is in early 18 years ago, we really didn't assess we didn't have the ability to assess the extreme event problem. And now we're seeing this outbreak of extreme floods, fires, you name it, that have kind of surprised us a little bit, right? So the scientific community. So I think we need to think about how we bring in these extreme events into those scenarios, into the adaptation. That's another thought. The third thought related to the first two is that we're in a challenging political climate because the national government's it's not going to be formally involved in the IPCC assessment. It's unclear the degree to which the American scientists will participate in that and that sort of thing. So that's a big change and a problem. But yet the states in the Maryland, of course, is not, is still trying to address the issue. So we need to kind of advance, given the understanding of the potential disruption of federal climate services and information and so on. That's another thought. And then the final thought I had is that since then, there's a lot of rhetoric about this notion of resilience, right? So resilience has become the polite way to say in mixed company, adaptation to climate change, because avoids using the word climate change and talks about resilience. And I don't think people have a good notion of what that is. And that goes back to the first thing about the adaptation and response and working group. So to have a focus on this assessment, which does all of those things, it basically brings all of the latest assessments in, It brings in this notion of extreme events. It addresses the client needs about what the state through its adaptation and response working group is trying to do and consider. So I think those are some thoughts that I have. Finally, let me just say the last thing on my mind is that while my synapses are working, my cognitive skills are still with me for a while, my heart's still ticking. I'm happy to help in doing it, but I think we need the leadership to be next generation, because we need to have to continue this. So thinking about building a small group of people ready to lead this, and I'm happy to help, bring that background in and so on, but we need that leadership to make it happen.
Absolutely, yeah, and that was going to be my next question as you were going through these is, like the case of Jonah, right? He on the third piece on the scenario development for net zero, et cetera. He's interested, and he could help us assemble a team. I was asking for your thoughts in terms of who could we recruit for something like this. So give that some thought, and actually everybody give that some thought.
Yeah, I think people, maybe everyone should try to give, if you know some thinkers in this, bright people in this area, to make some recommendations that we kind of talk it over. It's not always clear when you first start about who's the right leader. You need to kind of look at what the team looks like, could be, to determine that.
Right. Yeah.
And so what I'm prepared to do, now, at least in the short run, is just write a case study for what this should now do and what considerations, along with lines of what I said.
Perfect.
Then that would be a basis for you to have discussions with the adaptation and response working group, the commission, to see whether we're looking, heading in the right direction.
Well, and thank you for volunteering to do that, and we're looking forward to seeing that and building off that for the next steps. So thank you. Any thoughts on the nitrous oxide seems to be a little bit more better defined. It is almost like the methane thing we were discussing at the beginning. Is anyone wants to offer any thoughts on that and how we could go about doing this?
Fernando, I would just say that, Eric Davidson's taken like a little pass right now on the STWG until he gets back from India. But I think he's already at least agreed to take the lead on this. And he recommended, if my memory stands correct, at the June or July meeting, to being able to kind of give a presentation and lay out some considerations that the STWG should be working toward and get input from other people on that.
Great, fantastic.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, we have a fair amount of expertise, but arguably the world's biggest expert on nitrous oxide is going to be back in a few months. It's important in terms of CO2 equivalent. It's not huge, but it's the remaining major threat to the ozone layer. And I think reducing nitrous oxide emissions is mainly, and Adele can chime in, a matter of judicious practice in agricultural processes.
Great. Thank you, Ross. So folks, if we're able to work, even if it's slowly but surely on each of these three, I think we will be making a great contribution to the state, having some fun along the way, and we'll fulfill our recommendations and update to the science plan. We will fulfill our immediate obligations, but I think posing these longer term initiatives are something also that will give continuity to the work of our group. So I look forward to working with all of you on this and whoever else we recruit along the way. Exciting.
Yeah, just as a point of information. Sorry, Fernando, did I interrupt you? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was closing. Yeah.
I was just going to say that youth center is trying to, tidy up the final report that we put together, and Eric was part of that group, 12 of us, and Don was aware of it, and we submitted the proposal. And this is basically climate vulnerability of Maryland agriculture. In some corners, it's called climate smart agriculture. But we actually, my postdoc has now extreme events all the way, evapotranspiration, dry days, precipitation, using AI simulations and IPCC models into the future, near future and far future. We have those data on county basis for the state of Maryland. So, and in fact, first publication is published already as of last week, and second one is in the works. But the final report is going to come out as soon as Youth Center decides to share it. Then I would like to share that with you all. So we do have some sort of a small resolution type, county-based extreme events in terms of droughts and flooding and so on. So that could be contributing to the discussions into the future.
Right. Great. No, thank you, Adele. Thank you very much for that. So Dave, that's what I had for item 4. We can move along.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. Thanks for continuing. Thanks, folks, for continuing to move forward. So, we also put in a call there. If there were any other topics, we recognize this was a shorter agenda than usual. But if anyone had anything else, I didn't receive anything by email. But if anyone had anything else they wanted to bring up at this point, either short-term considerations or long-term considerations, now's the time to do it. Going once?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, then, the final topic is if there's any members of the public that would like to make a public comment. Not hearing any. So, Fernando, I think, up to you if we want to close out the meeting.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think so. So, folks, thanks a lot for joining us today. Shorter meeting than usual. That means that we're being very efficient, but I think that's good. Look forward to working more with you on developing these ideas. I think the rest of we have a meeting scheduled for next month already, right? So that's all. That's all set.
We do, and we have a presenter on that who's going to be talking about resilience related to riparian buffers.
Yes. And Dave and Rahat will be back in touch with logistics about the meetings with the other groups, and we'll follow up with that.
Yep.
All right, folks. Well, thanks again. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon and the weekend ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.